Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to week 11 of the BeSA program. Please let me know in the chat where it is you are listening from. Whereabouts in the world are you? What's the weather like where you are? In the UK here, it is frozen, cold, and snowy currently. So it's a fun time of year in the UK. So please let me know where you're calling in from, and we will get started in just a few minutes. So for this week, you just have me initially. Hello, everyone. So Ashish will be joining us a little bit later in the show. And we've also got an extra special guest here this week to talk to you about their experiences and how they've got to where they are in their career. Just going to open up the Twitch chat so I can see all you wonderful people. Awesome. So let's make my Twitch just isn't working. Let's just get Twitch working so that I can actually respond to you in the chat as well. So this week we are going to be talking about how to engage an audience. And when I say engage an audience, that doesn't necessarily mean public speaking. There's a whole different ways that you might need to engage an audience. That might be in interviews, that might be in technical conversations with customers where you're presenting your ideas. There's a whole different set of places where you might need to engage an audience. And as you maybe move through your career, you get more senior, you actually need to then start inspiring people, right? You need to inspire people to want to lead. So we're going to talk this week about how you can engage an audience. And to start with, I actually want to make a little bit of a confession to you all this week. And that is that the thought of public speaking used to absolutely terrify the life out of me. It used to really, really scare me. I'm actually quite introverted outside of things like this, talking in front of people. But normally day to day, I'm actually quite introverted, really. And if I think back to my time at school, back when I was at school, my kind of strategy at school was keep my head down, draw no attention to myself. I didn't really want to be in public, in the public eye, be seen by people. And in the UK, towards the end of our school, when we get to 16, 17 in our last year, we have this idea of what's called a head boy and a head girl in school. And the idea of a head boy and a head girl is to act as kind of a conduit between the teachers and the students. Actually, it doesn't really have any responsibility at all. It's just kind of a nice title to put on your resume or a job application or things like that. Or so I thought. So at the time, I thought that would be something that future James would really thank me for, because that would give me something really nice to talk to potential jobs about and put on CVs and things. What I didn't realize at the time, that in that specific year where I would specifically be head boy, would be the exact same year that my school that I went to was going to be not purchased, but it's going to change to be an academy here in the UK as opposed to a school. So the name of the school changed, the leadership changed, everything about the school changed. And what that meant in that specific year is that me and the head girl at that time needed to actually MC a whole day of presentations in front of the entire school, plus some parents and some local press, some journalists as well. So for little old introverted me, who thought they'd just be able to stick their feet up and kind of get this really nice name on their CV, that was what I thought. And this was me at the time. This was me back then at school. This is, that's kind of what I thought would happen. And it turns out I ended up on stage in front of all these people giving this talk. And I think back to the time before I went out on stage, I was kind of peeking through the curtain to see everybody coming in. Palms were sweating, really nervous, all of that nervous energy, didn't really know what to do. And then get out on stage and talk. And I can distinctly remember how I delivered everything. And it was very much at a single speed with a single tone of voice, reading exactly from a script. And it can't really have been very interesting for anybody listening. And the deep breath was in there as well. It must have been a really boring and tough presentation for people to listen to. But one thing that did teach me was the power that public speaking can have. And not just public speaking in front of large groups. Like I said at the start, this is job interviews. It's presenting your ideas. It's talking to your team, being able to get your ideas across in an engaging way is absolutely vital, especially as solutions architects, when a lot of our job is building these demos, talking to customers and designing solutions that we want them to buy into. It's a skill, just like any other skill. You wouldn't jump straight into building a large-scale distributed system on top of Kubernetes across multiple clouds and multiple regions before you'd ever built a Hello World. Public speaking, engaging audiences, it's a skill that you can build, a skill that you can work on. So let's imagine now that we need to give a talk and you need to go and talk to your customer. Let's say we need to talk about Lambda. Let's say the customer is interested in using Lambda to solve a problem. And let's say you're going to be talking to around 15 to 20 people. So not a huge number of people, you're not keynote at reInvent, but it's not a nice, easy one-to-one conversation. Now, if you needed to prepare for this conversation to talk about Lambda, where would you start? How would you start to produce that presentation? So the customer just wants to learn about Lambda. So if you've got an idea, just drop it in the chat. What would be the first thing you kind of do to talk about Lambda? Yeah, absolutely. Real world analogies. Ashish, we have the absolute master of analogies in our midst today. So yeah, event driven. That could be one thing you could talk about. So the absolutely key place to start, at least in my opinion, is with knowing your audience. And I just want to tell you a little story before we talk about that. So just last week, I was talking to my girlfriend, and my girlfriend had been to a conference that day. My girlfriend works in sports. She would not mind me saying that she is not a technical person at all. And one of the speakers at this conference was a solutions architect, strangely. But, these cross-industry speakers can work quite well sometimes. And my girlfriend couldn't actually tell me what the talk was about. She'd heard the word data lake and data warehouse, and it seemed like the person speaking was just there to sell an app. That was kind of all she could ascertain from the presentation. Now, what that says to me as someone who does speaking is that the person speaking either wasn't told what their audience was going to be, or he didn't think about the audience. Simon Sinek, who's a really popular public speaker and writer, there's a really great interview with him where he talks about public speaking, and he talks about one of the best tips is to go to give, not to take. So the person at this conference that my girlfriend went to, they were there to take. They were trying to sell an app They were trying to make the people in the crowd give something to him. Whereas if you go there to give, if you go there to transfer your knowledge to the audience, just give what you have and not care about anything in return, it makes you an incredibly powerful public speaker, because you're just there passionate about an idea that you're giving over to the audience. So knowing your audience is a really important place to start. So let's come back to the presentation that you need to deliver to LAMDA now. And I'm going to show you pictures of two groups of people now. And then we'll just talk about how you would maybe talk about LAMDA differently based on who you were talking to. So this is one of the audiences that you might have to speak to. A group of people in suits. We can kind of maybe look at these maybe as executives, or, you know, C-suite or higher up people. And then we've got this second group of people. And this second group of people are sat in front of computers writing code. Now, do you think you would give the same presentation to a group of executives as you would to a group of programmers? That's not a rhetorical question. That is an actual question. Yeah, absolutely. Of course you wouldn't. Of course that's not how you do that. And I see it so often in my career that I'll have have an incredibly good technical person, and they'll go into a meeting maybe with maybe not a C-suite exec, but, you know, somebody who's non-technical, and they'll go in and start talking about API gateway and WAF and Lambda scaling and provision concurrency. Like, none of these words mean anything to a non-technical person. And all you can kind of achieve is, much like my girlfriend, they just zone out. They hear all these technical words and go, I don't know what that means, and just stop listening. So one of the most important things you can do is know the audience that you're going to talk to, and change how you deliver the content based on who you're talking to. So if we're talking to developers about Lambda, we might talk about the fact it's event-driven and reactive. We might talk about the fact that you don't need to manage infrastructure. You just package up your code, upload your code, and off you go. These are all things that a developer would be interested in. If we're talking to an executive, probably the only thing they're cared about is the fact that you don't pay for your code when you're not using it. A very different language they can understand, speaking about something that they would actually be interested in. Let's think about another example. Let's think about Amazon S3. When we talk to developers about S3, we might talk about durability and availability, 11 nines or 7 nines of availability and durability, whatever it is that S3 has. Again, an executive doesn't care about that. But then if you talk to an executive and say 1 in every 10 million files might not get saved, again, that's words that anybody can understand. So really think about the audience that you're going to be presenting your ideas to, and change your content based on that. And when you've got that audience and that idea, think about the one single thing that you want them to take away from your presentation. Not the 5 things, not the 10 things, the one single thing you want them to take away. So for me today, that would be, for all of you listening now, to be more inspired to think about speaking in front of an audience. The one thing I want you to take away. So you don't want, and having this one single thing that you want them to take away, coupled with your audience, really helps you build out the right kind of content for the audience that you're speaking to. Notice at this point, we've not gone anywhere near PowerPoint yet. We're still thinking about who the audience is, what we want them to learn. And actually starting from this point puts you on a really great path to producing a really great presentation, no matter the size of the audience. And then the next thing you can start to look at, and Paramith's kind of mentioned this in the chat, is to talk about the problems. Start with why. Start with setting up the problem that the thing you're going to talk about is trying to solve. So in the context of Lambda, you might start talking about traditional ways of managing infrastructure and the problems that come along with that. And when you think about problems, don't think about one big problem that you set up at the start and then one big solution. Think about how you could break your presentation down into many micro problems, or what you might call beats. And that might be, you set up a problem, you give them a solution. You set up a problem, you give them a solution. You set up a problem, you give them a solution, so on and so forth. And it gives this really engaging way of talking about something rather than just listening to you talk about the solution for a long period of time. It keeps the brain engaged. If I say, how would I solve the problem of EC2 instances going offline? And then I maybe talk about Lambda for a little bit. And then I might say, oh, but how do I deploy my code to Lambda? I don't know how to deploy my code to Lambda. Another problem, another solution. And it keeps people engaged in your presentation throughout the whole thing, as opposed to them just thinking about something at the start and then maybe just zoning out as you start talking through your design or through your system. So I just want to go back to the comment from Simon Sinek and the go to give, not to take, because that can be quite a challenging thing to do as a technical person, especially for us who work for AWS. Like when we're talking about AWS solutions, by the nature of what we do, we kind of are a salesman in some kind of way, because we want people to use AWS services. You might put together a technical architecture for a problem that you're trying to solve for a customer, and then you want the customer to take that architecture and use it, right? But there's a really subtle shift you can put in here to how you think about this kind of thing. Instead of taking that architecture to make them want to use it, go to teach them how that architecture would work. Ask yourself, what can I teach them? What knowledge can I transfer to the people listening, instead of just solely thinking about getting them to use your architecture? The idea of going to give is a really, really powerful one, instead of going to take. And it'll make you come across as a much more trustworthy, connected speaker. So now you've got your audience, you know what we want them to learn. We want them to learn about Lambda. We know they're developers. So now it's time to actually start thinking about your content. And this can actually be one of the most challenging parts, how you structure your content in a way that makes people connect with it. And that's before you throw in things like writer's block and not being able to think of anything, making it look nice, animations, how you talk, things like that. And there's quite a lot of things to consider here. That is before you even open up the PowerPoint interface and you've got all these buttons and animations and all these crazy things going on. So when you start to think about your content, and this applies not just for speaking in front of audiences, this applies for live demos, for whiteboarding, think about the story that you want to tell. Think about what's the story that goes along with the thing that you're trying to talk about. Set up the problem statement and go from there. And this is a really great book by an author called Yuval Noah Harari. I hope I've got his name right. And part of this book is Yuval goes from the very beginnings of humankind right through to current modern times, and he talks about the history of humankind. And one of the ideas that Yuval raises in the book is around this idea of stories. And for almost the entirety of human history, humans have used stories as a way to bring people together or collaborate around a common goal or a common target. A really simple example, if you imagine back to prehistoric times, you might be out hunting and you might go down to the watering hole to try and hunt, and maybe there's a lion at the watering hole. That's part of their territory. So you go running back, you manage to escape from the lion, you go running back to your tribe, you get back to your tribe, and then you tell them the story about what happened. Your tribe's not going to go to the watering hole again because there's a lion there, right? My dog can't do that. Reuben can't go and tell people about a story. And I've seen him do this numerous times when he runs into the same fence where he doesn't expect there to be a fence, and he runs into it numerous times a week normally. This idea of stories is something really powerful for us as humans because it gets us connected, it gets us invested into an idea. And if we bring this from prehistoric times right up to modern times now, if you think of almost any movie in any genre, there's likely to be some kind of formula in that movie. An action movie, something happens at the start, the hero or the heroine maybe does something, then something bad will happen and the hero or the heroine will end up in a bad place, and then something else will happen and there'll be a happy ending. The same applies to romance. There's these common stories that filter through these things we do as humans. It's a really powerful way to keep people invested in a presentation that you're giving if you think about what the story of that presentation is going to be and keep some kind of common theme running through the presentation. In this case, what we're talking about today, right? We set up the example of you need to give a talk about Lambda at the start, and we keep referring back to that same idea all the way through. Think about how you can bring that into any talks that you give. And if we think about the Amazon interview process over the last few weeks, we've talked a lot about the STAR technique, how to handle Amazon interview questions. It's just a story, right? A story that you've been through, you've practiced, and then you can deliver that story in an engaging way. And when you're thinking about this story, it's okay to start with a script, at least initially. Write it down. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, I was doing this last night, I initially wrote down a whole long script of the kind of thing I wanted to say. That ensures that you are delivering the story in an engaging way, and actually record yourself delivering this script. Now, if you are anything like me, it is one of the most painful things that you can do is to listen to yourself speak. But it's actually a really powerful way to identify the things in your presentation that maybe don't flow correctly, or maybe things that don't come out naturally or work in a slightly different way than you expect them to. So once you've identified the story that you want to give, think about how you want to deliver it. And again, this applies to the Amazon leadership principles and Amazon interviews. If you think about your STAR responses for all the different leadership principles, you might write down exactly what it is that you want to say about that example. And then you might slim it down into bullet points. So you're not reading it word for word, but you've got a bullet pointed list of prompts that kind of prompt your mind into talking about a specific topic or a specific thing. And that gets you away from that. And I'm sure you've all seen presentations where you can see somebody's reading from a script. You can see that their eyes are going along the screen, and then their eyes go down a little bit, and then their eyes go down a little bit more. And you kind of lose some of that passion and that enthusiasm because all their brains are focused on doing is processing the words that they're reading and then speaking them out again. So having a script is a great place to start, but if you can kind of condense that down into some key bullet points that you think are the most impactful things that you want to say or that will prompt your brain into talking about something. So now we've got we know our audience, we know what the thing is we want them to take away, we've thought about how we're going to set this up and the story that we're going to tell. So with Lambda, we're going to talk about, let's imagine we set up a heroine called Susan. Susan's an infrastructure administrator, and Susan needs to manage all the infrastructure for her customer, and the infrastructure keeps going offline. So how do we help Susan achieve something? and then we go in to talk about Lambda. And then we might talk about Lambda for a little bit, and then we might raise another problem that Susan encounters. It's okay to actually have people in your stories, like make them relatable, make them tangible, and that's possible even in the technical world. The hero or the heroine that you use in a story doesn't need to be a person. Lambda could be the hero. Most of the times it is, right? If we'd had this serverless 8-week serverless track, you've probably all seen that Lambda is in a lot of cases the hero. So think about how you can not just deliver technical content, but you can deliver it in an engaging and insightful way. Yeah, absolutely. Now, in case study equals story. Absolutely. Case studies are a fantastic way to engage an audience. And if you introduce a case study straight away, that can get people engaged right off the bat. There's a talk I've given before about .NET and .NET on Lambda and .NET on serverless. And I opened up with a case study about FINRA, which is a financial institution in the US, and how they reduced their costs by 86% by adopting Lambda. If you drop a story like that right up front in your presentation with some good data points, people are going to be listening. So yeah, case studies are a fantastic way to do that. So now that you've got all these pieces of your presentation, now it might be time to actually start preparing some content. Now is the time where it's okay to open up PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever the presentation software is that you use. And presentations, PowerPoints don't have to be boring. And there's a very specific thing that makes them boring, and that is presentations filled with text. Words make them boring. And actually, researchers at the University of California did a study, and they looked at which bits of the brain are engaged when you're processing language through either reading the language or listening to the language. And what the researchers found, interestingly, is that the same part of the brain is used to process language, whether you're reading it or listening to it. Now, what does that mean for your presentations? That means if you pop a slide full of text on the screen, maybe you've got 10, 20 bullet points describing all the different components and characteristics of Lambda, people are going to read that. Naturally, a lot of text appears on a screen and you're going to go and read it. Now, if you're talking about that content at the same time people are reading it, how are their brains going to process all that information at the same time? They probably aren't. So think about your use of text and think about the content that you put on the slides. Ashish does this absolutely wonderfully in that there'll be a slide with a diagram on it, and then Ashish has got this really cool tablet where he can actually draw boxes and write on the actual deck itself. And that's something I've tried to take from Ashish in my own whiteboarding, in my own sessions, is have these slides that are very visual, but then you can annotate on top of that, and you can look at how you can draw people's attention to certain parts of their images whilst you talk about them. So just think about the way you use text and the way you add images to any kind of presentation that you're giving. Now, one caveat I will give to that is quite an obvious one, is if you're displaying a quote from somebody. So if you've got a quote from something somebody said, then displaying that quote on the screen is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, because that's part of your presentation. But remember what I've just been talking about with the researchers using looking at the areas of the brain. If you flash a quote up on screen, don't instantly dive into the content that you want to talk about alongside that quote, because people will be reading the quote and processing the quote and potentially not actually listening to what you're saying. Well, they might be listening, but they might not be taking in exactly what it is that you're saying. So now you've been through, you've got your deck, you've got your presentation, however that might be. It might be a deck, it might be some live whiteboarding, however it is that you're going to talk about Lambda. Now you're ready to deliver, right? You've got all your content, you're good to go. Happy days. Absolutely not. So one of the most important ways to actually get over that fear of public speaking, at least for me personally, is practice. Practice, practice, practice. One of my dad's favorite sayings is the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. The 5 Ps. So actually talking out loud your content, record yourself delivering your content, as painful as it might be listening back to it. Practice makes it so much more natural. What you want to kind of be aiming for is, imagine you're in a coffee shop with one of your friends and you're giving your friend the advice that you want to give in your presentation. It wants to be conversational. It wants to be like you're having a chat over a coffee, not that you're just reading off a script or delivering something. And at least in my mind, kind of paradoxically, the best way to make your presentation seem more natural is actually to rehearse more, which kind of doesn't make sense to me, because you don't rehearse going for a coffee with your friend when you go to have a chat. But practicing and rehearsing and knowing the content means you can be more conversational, because you're not reading from that script. You can react to things as they happen. You know, we do it when we do BeSA. We'll see a comment in the chat and we'll just divert and talk about the chat. If you're reading from a script, you then need to actually jump back into where you were in the script and try and work out where you left off. So the more practice you do, the more time you put into it, the more natural, the more conversational it will seem. And if you couple that with a bullet pointed script, if you do get a little bit lost or a little bit flustered, you can just take your glass of water, take a drink, refresh yourself, and carry on. Pick up where you left off. Practice makes perfect. It really does. So, perfect timing. Practice makes perfect. Exactly. Dovzia effects. So that's kind of how you can go about thinking about any kind of presentation you give. And like I say, a lot of what I've talked about there is in the context of bigger public speaking, standing on stage. But these things apply no matter how you engage your audience. Just imagine for a second if you go off and deliver this Lambda presentation now, and the team of developers that you deliver the presentation to, they're probably used to someone just coming in and talking technical at them, just talking about the technical components of things. If you go in and you've thought about the content, you've thought about what you want them to learn, you've got some kind of story going through your presentation that has some kind of hero. Maybe the hero is Lambda, and Lambda comes in and saves the day in a really bad situation. And then you talk about that in the with your architecture or the thing you've designed alongside it. Or maybe it's a job interview at Amazon, or any job interview for that matter. Being able to tell stories about your life in an engaging way is really quite powerful. And then before we get into some more general, kind of smaller, just tips and tricks around speaking, this is coming from the awkward, introverted person standing at 16 years old, nervously delivering this talk in a monotone voice and not really pausing to take a breath. I'm still introverted. I still find these kind of events scary, but with the right preparation, with the right story, things like talking in front of an audience that is of a slightly bigger scale does get a lot less terrifying. So let's just talk about some more specific tips and tricks now you can use when you're engaging with people. And just before I went off to reInvent, I was lucky enough to work with one of the speaker coaches that we have at AWS. And amongst many of the things that we talked about, one of the things that they said to me that has really stuck with me as far as presentation goes is this idea that only you know that you've made a mistake. If you say something slightly different to how you rehearsed it, or you fumble your words slightly, or you maybe something doesn't come out quite right. Only you know that. The audience don't know that. The only reason the audience would know that is if you were to tell them, sorry, I said that wrong. Oh, no, sorry, I meant da, 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 da. If you make a mistake or you say something slightly wrong, just carry on. And then maybe in a few sentences time, you go, actually, when I was talking about serverless, I meant to say Lambda, not Fargate. And you can do it that way as opposed to fumbling over your words and kind of getting lost and all mixed up. And as Pawan said in the chat, take a second, breathe, relax, take a drink, reset yourself, and then carry on. But I found that, at least personally, a really powerful idea that nobody else knows if you make a mistake in what you're talking about. You've got the power to clarify that if you need to. And another really easy tip to take on is around how you introduce yourself. And again, this is another tip that came from the speaker coaches at AWS. And as much as we like to think so, as much as humans, our ego likes to tell us, the people who are there listening to you talk don't really care about you. So when you come to introduce yourself, and I'm sure we've all seen presentations like this where someone steps up and they say, I'm James Eastham, I'm a senior cloud architect at AWS. I live in Lancashire in England. I've got a dog who's 3 years old, and I started my career 10 years ago, and I've done and now I've been at AWS. Like, people don't care about your life story. People don't care about your autobiography. They care about what it is you can teach them. So think about that when you're talking in a meeting, in your interviews at Amazon, anything. The introduction you give yourself doesn't need to be 10, 15 minutes of autobiographical life story. It can be nice and simple. So the advice we got for reInvent was, I'm James Eastham, I'm a senior cloud architect at AWS. Let's get started. Simple as that. Get into it. Don't spend too much time on that introduction. It's okay to tell personal stories or stories that add some context to what you're talking about to build that trust and build that connection with the audience. But just introducing yourself and talking about your life story when it's completely irrelevant can just, again, lead to people switching off. That first minute or 2 minutes you have in any kind of setting or with any kind of audience is really important, and spending that talking about yourself may not be the best use of that time. Now, as humans, we are incredibly lucky. We're incredibly lucky because we've got one of the most versatile musical instruments ever created built into us. And that's our voice. The kind of things we can do with our voice is fantastic. You know, we can up the pitch and we can make ourselves sound really excited. Or if we really want to deliver a point, we can slow down so people understand it. So use the whole range of things you can do with your voice. Use pauses, use pace, use the tone of your voice to talk about, you know, when you're excited, when people should listen, when you really want to deliver it. Steve Jobs was an absolute master at this. If you watch any of Steve Jobs' talks for Apple, where he'll build suspense in his presentations, and he'll do that with his voice. And he'll put these really long pauses in to make you wonder what's going to come next. But even Steve Jobs, he's one of the best public speakers I think I've ever seen. But Steve Jobs, if you watch some of his early interviews, he's really awkward. It's a skill. It can be learned. It can be practiced. We have all got that capability within us to be able to present in an engaging way. And that doesn't necessarily need to be on stage in front of hundreds of people. That could just be delivering an engaging presentation to your team or to your customer. We've all got that capability. We just put that extra little bit of effort into it. Q&A. Q&A can be a really tricky one when you're doing any kind of speaking, small audience, big audience, because you've got absolutely no idea what people might ask you about or what people might talk to you about. So it's important to remember that you're there to try and build trust with the people you're talking to. You're there to try and engage with them and connect with them. So just telling them something that you don't really know the answer to isn't going to do that in a very good way. So don't be afraid to say you don't know, but go with, I don't know the answer to that question. Please come and see me after we're done talking and we can dive a little bit deeper into it. So there's no need just to cut them off, but take it offline. If you're doing a virtual presentation, maybe it's on Zoom, you could just say, let's put that to one side for the minute. We'll come back to it later and carry on with what it is that you were going to deliver. And if you're doing Q&A in front of any kind of audience, maybe in like a more typical public speaking setting, it's always really useful to repeat the question back that you've been asked. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One being it gives you time to think. It gives you time to make sure that you've understood the question. You're giving the person asking an opportunity to clarify. But it's also then ensures that everybody else in the room has heard what the question is. If you get asked a question in a room of 50 or 100 people, there's not really much chance that everyone will hear it unless there's a mic being passed around. So repeating the question back ensures that everyone gets the same experience from that conversation. And then the final thing I just wanted to talk about is demos, because demos are something that we do quite a lot as solutions architects. And to do that, I'm just going to actually share a different screen, move all of that over there. So this is my IDE, and this is what my IDE looks like when I'm just developing day to day. So I'm pretty confident not many of you are going to be able to read that right now. If you can, great, you've got great eyes. Or you just zoomed your browser in. So think about the zoom. Think about how people are going to be viewing this differently, watching it through a screen versus you looking at it on your huge monitor. I've just zoomed that right in. I'm sure you can see things a whole lot better now. You can actually read what is going on. And if you're talking about a specific part of your demo, let's say I'm talking about how to define an event bridge pipe, and I'm talking about the source parameters, highlight them. Again, Ashish does this absolutely brilliantly with his little drawing tablet. And I've actually got one sat in front of me. I've just not plugged it in. But like, highlight the bit that you're talking about, and you could do that on a whiteboard. You could draw a box around it. You could highlight it like I've done here in my IDE, but make it really clear which component of your architecture, of your code sample that you're talking about. And I'm not great at this. Like, if any of you have seen the stuff I do on YouTube, normally I get halfway through recording a video and then forget that I've zoomed in, and then all of a sudden things zoom in and get really easy to read. I forget this often, but think about the people who are going to be consuming whatever the content is that you're producing, and think about their experience consuming it. And this also applies to things like whiteboarding. Think about things like color blindness. You know, an awful lot of the population suffer from some kind of color blindness. So think about the colors that you maybe use when you're doing a demonstration to make sure that people will be able to see it. And if you have to use a color that maybe affects color blindness, don't just say, look at the red box, because people might not be able to see the red. Say, look at the box on the right-hand side of the screen, for example, or describe what's in the box. Draw the box around it and use that as a way to draw the eyes, but don't let that be the only way. And these are a couple of things that I've just found when you're doing demonstrations that make things flow a lot easier. The zoom is a really important one, just because, like I said, if I zoom out to my normal working zoom, that's really difficult for people to read. So that's everything I wanted to cover around public speaking. That leads us just about up to 45 minutes, which is perfect. Does anyone have any questions they want to pop in the chat, or any comments, or anything they want to know more about around public speaking or engaging an audience? Or no, No worries. Thanks, Paritha. Yeah, I think before we just take a quick 5-minute break, the one important thing I'd like you all to take away is that we've all got this capability within us. It doesn't have to be in front of hundreds of people. We've all got this ability to present engaging content. And if you put the work into it up front, you think about the audience, you think about the why, you think about the story that you want to tell, you are a massive step closer than a huge number of presentations that I see day to day. So the couple of questions, any good books on public speaking? Yes, I have got a couple of resources that I'd noted down before I started. I'll pop them all in the chat. I've got books. I've got a TED talk that absolutely changed the way I think about public speaking. So yes, I've got a few links that I'm going to pop in the chat. Have I ever encountered a question which I had difficulty answering all the time? Yeah, it comes with the nature of kind of, doing this, that people are going to see you as the person with all the knowledge, right? If you're speaking in front of an audience. So they're going to ask the tricky questions. And if you know the answer, great. If you don't know the answer, again, don't try and talk through it or answer it on the fly. If you genuinely don't know, or you're not 100% sure in the answer that you're giving, don't answer it. Take it offline. Well, not don't answer it, but just take it to one side. You don't need to answer it there and then. You can just say, I'm not sure on the answer to that. Let me come and find me afterwards, and we'll get back to it. Or this applies in your Amazon interviews. If you've got the technical part of your interview, then and you don't know the answer to something, say that you don't know, but say I don't know, but here's what I would do to find the answer. I would reach out to a specialist. I would go and Google it. I would go and do this or do that. Like, you don't have to answer the difficult questions there and then. You can always say I don't know. And one of the Amazon leadership principles is earn trust. That's one of the easiest way to earn trust, is to admit that you don't know something and just describe how you would go about solving it. So the question about if you would run out of time, that's where practice gets really important. If you know you've got 50 minutes to talk, then having rehearsed that a few times, you always want to aim to finish 5 minutes before the time that you have been allotted. And I realize saying this that I am just going over the time that I've been allotted. So I can imagine Ashish is sat there now shaking his head at me. But yeah, if you're running out of time and you're rushing through the content, is probably not the best way to do it. You want to make sure that you give the audience the right experience. So if you've rehearsed and you've practiced and you've put the work in, you'll know your timings anyway. And it's always good to leave yourself a buffer, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I always find, at least personally, that things take longer in person than they do when you're practicing. So giving yourself a 10-minute buffer gives time for Q&A and time for you to overrun or go off on a bit of a tangent when you need to. And yeah, the final thing I will say is, Nalan's just mentioned Toastmasters. That was another thing I was going to pop in the chat, but Toastmasters is a global organization set up to help people improve their public speaking. That is the idea of Toastmasters. There's communities, Toastmasters groups all over the world, towns, cities. I put a link to the Toastmasters website in the chat. As always, if you've got any questions, anything that you want to talk about, LinkedIn, Twitter, anything, any of the social medias, get in touch. Feel free to reach out. And yeah, happy engaging audiences in the future. We will take a short break now. So I don't have a fancy timer like Ashish does, unless Ashish is here, and Ashish can put a timer up. So we will come back at 5 to the hour. So for me now, wait, here comes Ashish. There he is. So yeah, we'll come back in 5 minutes time, and we will introduce our special guest. So I will see you all then, and thank you for listening.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the talks from James, and it was really interesting way of presenting things. Obviously, as a solution architect or as a professional, you would always be involved into presentations or sharing knowledge. So, thanks, James. It was really, really interesting to see you deliver that. And means I picked up some tips from that. So obviously, I would keep on using those tips. So it was nice one. And now we move on to the next phase of it. So thanks, James. And probably I like your sweater, by the way. I enjoy it. It's
Thanks.
a good one.
Got a little Christmas tree behind me as well. I'm trying to get in the
Wow.
spirit a
Oh,
little
it's a
bit.
small one, James. We need a
It's only
bigger
a
one,
small.
isn't it?
I've got a big one in there. I just can't move my
Okay, yeah,
webcam
I get
on.
your point. Yeah, nice one. So thanks everyone, and staying tuned here is important. Like you are all here on weekend, and we appreciate it, and we want to bring like more people to you so that who could share their knowledge, and you could get more idea on how it feels like moving from one role to another role, what it takes to move forward, what it takes to be into AWS. Like some of you always reach out on LinkedIn, hey, I want to work in AWS, what the journey looks like. So rather than I or James telling it, let's talk about someone who has just recently moved from India to AWS UK. And he is a BESA participant, been very active initially, right now too busy with ramp up time, I can guess so. So let me introduce Abhay to you, and then we will take forward and we'll discuss about how all these things work. So Abhay, I am adding you to stream. Probably you could see us here. How are
Yeah,
you
hi.
doing, sir?
Hi,
Hi.
Ashish. Hi, James.
Hi.
Hi.
How is it, Abhay? You shifted to your new house, I guess, right?
Yes, yes. Just
Right.
3 weeks back. And
Guy.
it's a three-bedroom big house, and I'm alone currently. So,
Ah, come on. Call us in for a party. We would be happy to join you.
yes,
It's a Christmas, isn't it?
it's a bachelor's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that would be good one. And where you shifted, Abhay?
25th of last month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Good.
No, I
Thank
mean,
you.
my first question is, how are you dealing with the weather? Because
Yeah.
I imagine I
Yeah.
imagine the temperature is very different in the UK than it is in India.
It's freezing, and it's exactly opposite from where I came. Actually, it's
Yeah.
very hot there. 30 is a normal temperature there, and here, my agent has just adjusted it to 21. I said 21 is too too less, and that
Yeah.
mom has got only 25. I said okay then. It's freezing. Yeah, it's a little bit totally
That, that
different. And snow
that's a
is
challenge.
again a new things to me. And yes, but just trying to get adjusted with this.
Yeah. That's the biggest challenge. Like for me, I moved from Dubai to London,
Mhm.
and Dubai there are three weathers only: hot, hotter, and hottest. So for me it was quite challenging stuff too. But yeah, you get used to maybe first year, but yeah, next year onwards you would be pure Londoner, or pure UK person would have all the things in your place. So
Yeah,
all the best and hope you're settling well. So
yeah,
we are interested to know that how your journey was, like how you started preparation, or let's start from like what was your previous role and what is your current role, and then I'll talk more on that and we'll ask more questions there. And James probably chip in if he has any questions.
yeah, sure, sure. Just a brief about me. I'm from India, Pune city, which is in Maharashtra state. Uh, it's near Bombay or Mumbai. Many of you must be knowing it. Uh, Before AWS, I was in an organization called Tech Mahindra in delivery IBU. And when I left that organization last, I think 5 to 6 years, I was in AI ML COE, working as AI ML consultant. And About my IT experience at around 18 plus now. And throughout this particular 18 plus years, I am in the technical side, except few couple of years in quality management, kind of quality consultant kind of a role. But otherwise, it's totally technical journey, working as a right from I think 2001 or something. So as a developer, then slowly senior developer, then designing softwares in Java, mostly Java. Then I was shifted to data migration kind of projects where I handled a couple of data migrations for uh, Germany and Netherlands clients, etc. And then last 5 years, I was in AIML COE. So that's the brief technical, I think the professional journey, we'll say, uh, so far. And of course, before I came into this delivery part, of course, I was actually the IT started from the training executive role. So I was in a training for around 6 years, where I handled the normal training batches of normal students and plus corporate. So, and then I moved to this delivery uh, area.
Quite
And
a
again,
spectrum.
again back to
Quite
training in
training. Yeah, yeah. I
the
mean, it's a life is full circle, isn't it? So yeah, I agree on that. But quite a spectrum, I would say, like being into different role and now training and again coming back to training. So yeah, that's interesting thing. Thanks, Shiva, sharing that, Abhay. Now, what was the motivation to move to AWS? Changing country, going from India to coming to London. What was the motivation? Like people do not make changes, right? Change is the most difficult thing we have to go through. So, and people are afraid of it. So, what was the motivation?
Motivation is like to start AWS journey. I remember it was 3 years back. So when I will call it as AWS 101.
Hmm.
I started in the month of October 2019. And the inspiration was actually, as I said, I was working in AIML COE. And while developing some POCs or some small project, I observed that this AIML stuff require a compute more. And it's not possible to have it in a normal localized or a data center kind of infrastructure, and that infrastructure cloud is providing. And
Hmm.
the majority of our client discussions or any POC implementation, I found that cloud is playing a major role, whether it's AWS, Azure, or GCP, whatever. But the cloud was the main thing because of the easily available infrastructure. So that actually triggered the interest. So I thought, why not go and explore this particular area? And I started learning AWS, and with the plan that I should go for a very starting certification, the solution architect associate. So that was the just a plan. Then as I started learning, it's like a fascinating world I found. So
Hmm.
many things are there. So in one place you will find the development, designing, six ops, AIML, whatnot. So everything is packaged in one area. So that actually fascinating me. And then I started learning. I cleared this solution architect associate in January, so it took me 3 months to prepare for that certification right from scratch. So I was not having any background of any cloud platform so far that time. So then actually I started looking for because the only the knowledge and the certification is not enough. So unless and until you get into that particular mode of where you work on that particular platform and implement some solutions, etc. And that's why I said, okay, just a certification won't help. So let's try to be inside. And that time, of course, I did not have any plan or any thought of joining AWS and Amazon, but the plan was to just work in AWS platform. So I started hunting in my current organization that time, but somehow it couldn't work out. then but then again 2 3 months went like there was no AWS at all. There was no cloud. I was just continuing my current work that time. And then I realized, I realized that I've started forgetting the things. So this should not be, because I've invested 3 months of money into it, and I got that particular knowledge, so it should not be a wastage. So what I did, I started doing various workshops on AWS sites, then tutorials. So my intention was to just keep in touch with the technology, so that whenever I'll get a chance to work in, I should be comfortable. So even if I'm not, unfortunately, did not get any chance to work practically on AWS, so I just continued to be in touch with AWS using various sources available in, and it's very good that it is free, of course. So in our AWS side, there are many such areas, like I said, workshops, then tutorials. Then I attended some courses on Udemy to be able to be in the touch of technology. So and that's why, and one I think 2021 around February, I got a LinkedIn request from Prasad Rao, and who is, of course, a core team member of BeSA. That time, then I started interacting with him and asking and bothering him like anything, asking various questions. What should I do? I'm associate now, certification with me, but should I go for professional or database specialty? What should I do? So while interacting with him, I got interest that he actually inspired me to get into AWS. And he said, I think you are technically enough to get into AWS. Only thing is you should concentrate on what is called as leadership principle. And from that point onwards, he of course shared a lot of material with me and asked me to go through it first and get it comfortable with leadership principle. And it's very important thing he actually told me that time, that don't worry about the AWS experience. So in AWS, to get into AWS, you don't require AWS experience at all. What is important is the leadership principle, and you should be able to convert your previous experience map to your leadership principle, and you should be able to describe that. That's all. So then I started, of course, going through it, and being from a technical side, to be frank, at the beginning it was little bit overwhelming for me for this behavioral part of it, because being a technical, I've never been such a idea of forming some stories kind of. Technical is fine, so I can
I
talk
agree.
2 3 5 hours on technical, but to convert this into a form of a story and a specific format, it was little bit overwhelming for me. I thought, I don't think so. I'll be able to crack that. Okay, technical is fine, but this particular leadership principles. Then I again approached Prasad with this particular concern. He said, no, but it's not, I can, it's very easy. I will not say it easy, but it's not difficult and it's possible. If you practice and if you study all the leadership principle well and try to recall your previous experience and try to map this and create some stories, that's it. So then I started working on that, and then and I think it took around a year to uh, start this particular process, I remember. And then, of course, on May 7th, I think, our first BeSA session started
May
with.
7th, yes.
Yeah. So because of Prasad, of course, I came to know about this BeSA program and joined uh, this uh, this particular BeSA program and a part of that. And
Nice,
that's
good
the
history.
AWS inspiration.
That's a good one.
So when you talk about I think I'm interested up here because
Yeah.
that thing you said about like technical is easy and this the behavioural and the storytelling that's
Yeah.
difficult, and I think that's something that a lot of technical people struggle with, right?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you've got any specific strategies or anything specific that you did that you thought really helped you that might be interesting for some of the people listening. Like, what specific things did you do?
Yes, yes. Actually, I what I did actually, I thought of only going through, because the learning leadership principle was important to get into a behavioral part, because it's a behavioral thing, and then I thought, how should I prepare for this? What I did, I've whatever the resources provided by Prasad, I started going through it. That is first, and then I started I taking a notes of that in a kind of so convert that particular material, whatever. For example, first leadership principle is a customer obsession. So after understanding customer obsession, just convert that into my words. I just prepare the notes in Microsoft Word or any text thing, and just write the things, and then just correct those things. And of course, Prasad helped me that time to just correct the thing, correct my understanding, etc. So the writing in our own words, it's very important, I think, to, because technical is technical, you cannot convert that into our words, it's as it is.
I get your point.
But this behavioral part, because my interpretation could be different than yours. So that I actually started writing the things in the form of Word document, and my understanding. And then next step, of course, to recall whatever the experiences I got in previous job function, and then try to get into that particular star format. That's the next step that I did.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That's completely interesting. Yeah, that's good suggestion. People who are on call,
Yeah,
like to note down things and try to understand it first before you
yeah,
start forming stories. So if you
almost.
understand it, you would obviously be able to connect dot and
Yeah,
then connect your own stories with that. So yeah, that makes sense.
exactly.
Completely makes sense. That's a good thing to know. So how the process started means, yeah, you were prepared. What else? So you started
Yes.
joining BeSA. What else?
But
What happened next?
yes, next is yes, the BeSA program started, and immediately I think Ashish shared some 5, 6 job opportunities in AWS, and all of them were in training. So I think there were 5, I guess.
Yeah.
So then I went through all those, and out of 5, I think four was requirement of a foreign language. For example, Germany, then
Italian, yeah.
yeah, for
Dutch,
French
yeah, I
in
agree.
France, etc. Italian. So only UK job description did not have any specific a foreign language. It's an English language. So I picked up that and share with you, and from that the journey actually started. And important thing is, while going through that BeSA, as you mostly quite a time you said that it's better to get the reference rather than applying directly in AWS. So that's a very important thing. And because especially in my case, for example, had it been I applied directly, for example, and it is in London, UK, and I was in India. So if I applied and that particular job is not sponsoring the visa, then that particular aspect
Yeah,
is not known to me unless it is
exactly.
referred by some Amazonian
Internal.
inside. So that was the important. So reference is important. So I remember on 11th May, I approached you and you referred me. And I think on 13th May, immediately, I got a mail from AWS that they
Nice.
want to have a first round of technical interview with me. And the first technical interview happened. It is 1 hour on 23rd May. After 10 days, they schedule. Uh, yeah, the first actually always a technical interview. It was, I would not say easy. I would not say very difficult. It was moderate. So it's just 1 hour, one-to-one technical interview. We talked about of course, AWS and around technology. So that was the first round.
Nice.
And yeah, so then immediately next day, I got the confirmation that I cleared that round, and they want me to go for the second round.
I have a
And
question here, Abhay.
yeah.
Like, so technical first round was technical, and
Mhm.
obviously referral works. So people who are not aware, like some position are support are sponsored with visa. So in case like somebody wants to move from country to country and visa sponsorship is not there,
Yeah.
due to some legal reasons, I think HR cannot publish it on the LinkedIn forum. But if you know someone internal like you, me, Prasad, or Abhay, or anyone, we would be able to check that for you, that hey, whether this position support visa or not. So there's point
Yeah.
to apply or not, because otherwise you are just wasting time. So there's no point on following up that. So better would be to check someone with internal people. If you could get that information, whether it is like supporting visa sponsorship, that would make your chances much better. So that is one thing.
Yeah.
Second is like first interview, like technical interview, like were you pressurized to get the into interview? Like you said that it happened just like 10 days, or did was the date confirmed by you that hey, I'm comfortable on that? Because sometimes people think, hey, I'm not technically ready, should I apply or not? What if interview call comes in? Was there flexibility to reschedule things?
Yes, yes, it was. Actually, the date was asked by the recruiter who actually contacted me, which is my convenient date and convenient time as well. And she tried to schedule. I think I remember I had to give three choices.
Hmm.
So out of those three, according to the availability of the interviewer, she scheduled that particular first technical interview. Yes, there is a flexibility. They don't force that. Okay, so you have selected for the next interview that particular interview thing. Then this is the date. This is not a case. So they ask you your choices also.
Makes sense, makes sense. And there is a question I'm checking here about the skill assessment. Now, to not to take credit from Abhay, but just trying to answer that. That skill assessment applies on some levels. It depends. So sometime like when we have so much people coming up for interviews, that time like a filtering mechanism may work as a skill assessment. And sometime if it role is like too technical, that time skill assessment is used, but not with every job profile. So it depends. So for Abhay, I don't think there was a skill assessment for you,
No,
Abhay, right?
no,
It
no.
was just technical interview
Technical,
initially.
start with technical. Yeah.
Good.
Telephonic.
And that makes sense. How you prepared for the technical round?
Yes. Prepared. Actually I was doing something here and there in AWS. So it actually did not take any much time for me prepare, but I just recalled and whatever the preparation I did for solution architect associate. I just recall that, and then some important services I have just revised those services, specifically say the EC2, VPC, then database, RDS, etc., etc. So, and the DNS. These are some of the very important initial services they may cover in a technical interview. So I revised that, and that's all. So within, I think, 13 to 23, within 10 days, I could prepare it because I was actually in touch with AWS. So
Makes
it
sense.
was
Makes
not
sense.
hard for me.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just
as
a
you didn't
matter
had
of
to start from
revising
scratch.
things.
That's a good thing. Now, I'm getting a couple of questions here, so I'll keep on answering that also,
Yeah,
Abhay, if you don't mind. So,
no,
one question is from Pawan is about what is skill assessment. So, Pawan, skill assessment is sometime they would give you like a scenario, or maybe let's say you're applying for a developer position, so there may be some assessment given to you online, which you would be given enough time to complete it. Let's say submit your code, or maybe provide a design document, or come up with a solution, or maybe if you're like automation, maybe ask you to write a cloud formation stack to deliver services. So that could be a skill assessment depending on position. Solution architect, professional services, technical trainer, maybe software developer. These could be different type of thing, and that is basically to check your technical readiness about that particular role you are applying. So it doesn't apply every time, but yes, that is what is checking the core technical skill of a person.
yeah.
Now, there was another question from Ramakrishnan is like, can we reschedule the interviews? I don't see a problem at all in that. See, as an interviewer, also, like sometime could not make it because of some family emergencies, or I got pulled into something else. So it's completely normal. It's not frowned upon. Everyone has emergencies, things happen. But yeah, don't like reschedule, like you I didn't show up and then I say I want to reschedule. That doesn't look nice, right? So be little proactive, be respectful of someone's time who is investing on you. So be little advanced if you could. And then I don't mind, I don't judge people if they have to reschedule. I have selected people or move forward to the next round even if they had to reschedule 2 or 3 times, because yeah, there may be some genuine thing. So be little cognizant of the time, but rescheduling is not at all frowned upon. That's completely normal, it can happen. Good, thank you. And question is from Deepa is, was technical interview purely based about AWS services?
Yes, actually, the role was AWS technical trainer. So the
Exactly.
first round is a technical round was around AWS only. So yes,
Makes
it's
sense.
totally
I, I'll
100% AWS. Yeah.
I want to give clarity here, Abhay. Like Abhay is being positioned or being interviewed for something what we call level 6 into AWS. So there are multiple levels here, level 4, level 5, level 6. So obviously level 4 is like someone who is just starting, level 5 who is like already into technology like 4 or 5 years, and based on obviously Abhay's experience, it was level 6 position he was being considered on. Plus, second reason is probably Abhay already had mentioned in his resume that he was solution architect associate. I guess
Also,
so. So
yeah.
so that if I'm an interviewer, that gives me idea that hey, Abhay already knows about the same language I speak on day-to-day basis. Let me talk about it. But we hire people from L6 which were not AWS savvy at all. And in that time, the discussion was not on AWS, but the basic general concept. Maybe they know a different cloud provider, maybe they know different on-prem offering on virtualization. So question can change. So it's not always to be a service oriented on AWS, but yeah, if you have experience, then obviously why not? We would prefer to talk in that term. So that can be something you should be aware. So if you're mentioning you are certified, we would take your word for it. So be ready for questions on that. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Next one, like what happened after the first round? What was the second round like?
Yes, actually, there are actually 7 rounds generally. So out of that, 2 technical and 5 behavioral, specifically around the leadership principles. The and I think second round is totally depends on the kind of role you applied for. For example, in my case, it is as a trainer or instructor role, a technical trainer or technical instructor role. So my second round was like a presentation round kind of. So it's like you are giving a 1 hour class to some students. So they actually simulate that kind of thing. So what they do is they give you one specific topic. For example, for in my case, I've got beanstalk to be presented in 1 hour presentation. So that presentation includes the PowerPoint presentation, of course, and plus some demo.
Hmm.
And the hiring manager, along with I think three were there, who actually attended that particular interview, and 45 to 50 minutes to present the topic, including demo, and 10 to 15 minutes questions from the panel, whoever is attending that particular presentation. It's kind of a class simulation. So as good as it's you're teaching that particular topic to a student, that kind of things is expected in that
Makes
particular
sense. Makes sense. Yeah, so that second round for Abhay was a presentation. So
presentation.
yeah, that can depend from position to position. Like for technical trainer, it obviously makes sense to see their technical skills and presentation. So that's why it was the second round for that. Yeah, good. And what was the preparation mechanism for that? Because obviously it is not like just technical. What other things you have taken into consideration that time?
Yes, and the presentation, the preparation of PowerPoint presentation. So that is the first, because and they importantly they here also they ask you your preferred date. So it's up to you. So how much time you want? Not of course in months, but you can have advantage at deciding the proper time you will require to, because you need to prepare the presentation from scratch, because the topic is not known earlier. So once you know the topic, then you need to prepare the presentation and plus some 5-10 minutes of demo as well. So
Mm-hmm.
the first part was preparing the PowerPoint presentation. So getting the information from, of course, official AWS sites, and very important. I just because I referred by Ashish. He helped me in each and every step here. So right from the first interview, second, actually he reviewed my presentation and given me a very small point to whatever the feedback and suggestions, like a color combination, then the text, then the diagrams, etc. So it's totally reviewed by him. It's not like you referred and the ball is in your court. So
Yeah, means that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
yeah, so whoever referred you, like Ashish, helped me during the entire interview process, like reviewing my presentation. We had a mock presentation also. He spared entirely 1 hour that time, and the review he gave me the feedback. So that was a great experience actually. And one more I remember now, in BeSA program, in one of the session, Ashish or Prasad said very important thing, that whenever you prepare for the interview or give any interview in Amazon, they interview you like they want to take you, not they want to reject you. That
Exactly.
I experienced actually. So the kind of a body language, the kind of the environment, the way it is created, though it is a virtual thing, but still you get actually very relaxed, and you came to know that yes, this person is not trying to trap you. Generally in other
Yeah.
I experienced interviews, so interviewer trying to trap you with some complex questions or something. But here I've experienced a very good experience, that the what whoever is taking an interview, he want me to get into AWS and not in the in a reject.
Exactly. Yeah. That's something makes sense.
Yeah,
See, if we are investing time, like if somebody is investing time, obviously everyone wants a good outcome. There is
correct.
a requirement. We see a person who is fitting up, not 100%, maybe 90, maybe 80, but we can always groom person, and it's not a complicated thing. Means when I was hired, I knew nothing about AWS. Means I knew that AWS exists. I was working with different cloud, but not with AWS. So it's not always technical. And same thing I would relay, Abhay. Yeah, yes, agree that people are trying to get you in. It's not like, hey, I want to reject somehow. Let me put complex
Exactly.
question. Let me make it life hell and then reject that person. So no, that is not a mentality. I can completely understand that.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's a
not
good
an
thing.
interview, it's a technical, or it's kind of a discussion going on with that particular person. That's the
Good.
kind of environment it's there. Yeah.
That's a good thing. How
Yes.
about the loop round? That's we hear a lot of complicated thing about, isn't it? Loop round. So
Yes,
it
yes.
loops people into unknown territories, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And that's the part actually I took 1 year to prepare. I would say.
So that was the most easy for you, isn't it?
Yes. The easiest part is that loop. So, and during the entire professional life, I had not given any such a 7 round interview. Two technical was okay, but that 5 rounds, the 5 hours. Actually, here the third, it's a third round, the final round. It called as a loop, where they conduct 5 round in that 1 hour each, and all of them are around leadership principles. And I think before this pandemic, it used to be face to face, what's
Yeah.
called as on site interview. But after pandemic, everything is virtual. So here also they ask you whether you want to span these 5 rounds in 2 days, or if you are comfortable, they actually conduct it in one day. So I chose one day because I don't want to.
Why to take pressure, right? Isn't it? Let's finish it in one day. Yeah, I
Yes,
get your idea.
yeah, yeah, correct. So one day, 5 hours, with of course break in between. So I remember it was started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it went up to 9:30 in the night.
Wow.
And that too only four, because that time one interviewer had some emergency, so he could not attend that, and they shifted that interview, and it was Friday. So the next fifth round happened on Tuesday. Actually, on
Mhm.
Monday also they could not schedule. So this kind of things happens because there are a lot of dependencies of others, and
Exactly.
their schedule, their availability. So it was on 8th July the fourth round happened, and then on 12th July the fifth round, and on 14th July the good news day.
Nice. That's interesting. That's a good one.
And now this loop, of course, it's a leadership principle, and there are 16 leadership principles. So each person the five. So it will take two principles, and they will ask you questions around this, something like this, the structure. So what I would suggest is for this particular thing, don't get overwhelmed with the 16 principles. So, not necessary each and every principle is related to your kind of a role. For example, in my case, it's my technical role basically, whether it is a teaching or a solution architect, whatever, but it's a technical role and not a managerial role. So some leadership principles say hire and develop. One principle is there. So it is not related to any what is called as individual contributor. It's related to a managerial role. So they
Mhm.
don't ask you about that. So you can
Judge.
skip some of the principles as per your role. So but at least I think on an average you should be able to prepare for at least 12 principles, I would say, out of 16, because 5 into 2 is 10, and there should be a buffer
I
for
get your point.
and for each principle at least two stories you should have, and the repetition of course is allowed, but try to not to repeat the stories, because and of course they actually specifically said that time, if you have already told that particular story to other interviewer, you can repeat that, so that is also not a issue, but uh,
Hmm.
good to have more stories
More
and
stories.
avoid repetition of
Makes
that.
sense. Makes sense. Yeah, so there was a question, how many interviews were there in loop? So it was five. Thanks,
Right.
Deepa, for answering that. So there are five interviews, and the idea here is like everyone would be having, let's say, every interview would have a two leadership principle to talk about, and they would check candidates' readiness on that. And it's not like just it is being collected. What happens after this loop? We have a meeting between all five of them, and they would then decide like, hey, what has to be done now? So it is like called like a follow-up
Mm.
round after the loop, and then everyone would be then connecting into that. We'll find out what we found out, and then collectively it is decided to move forward with that particular person or not. Or maybe it's not like just saying yes or no. Sometimes because there's a diverse panel available within that loop of five people, they may have that, hey, this person may be a good fit on a different department or a different role or a different profile. So that can also happen. So it's not like yes or no kind of a thing. It's a suitability kind of a thing. Is this person suiting up? Yes. If not, can we recycle it because he or she has already come up to this point, because there is some technical potential. But let's see if this profile can be recycled or not. So recycling happens. Don't worry about it. It happens all very often. Sometimes we find out that people are not suitable for, let's say, level 6, what they applied for, but they are technical and they can be competent enough. So we sometimes have situation where a position is lowered like L5, and they are hired as a L5 level 5, and then obviously they get into cycle and they can apply for promotion, and also that can be happened on that. So that should not be a problem.
Yeah.
That's a good thing about.
Yes.
Now the next part is like what afterwards. So you got the good news. What was the preparation afterward to move? It's not an easy move. You have family in India. Your visa has
Yes.
to be sorted and all the things. So what kind of support or the things you were provided with from AWS?
Yeah, it's very good support. So from 14th July till October 3rd, it's the period. So
Hmm.
it involves so one team actually start communicating with you regarding your all the requirement of visa requirement basically first,
Hmm.
and the require everything is on the portal, so it's virtualized, so there's no direct
Physical presence
face to
required.
face anything, because and it is uh, in UK, so there is no question of having some personnel going there and submitting anything. Everything is on the portal based. So actually, AWS outsource this kind of activities to other organizations. They themselves don't do it. So there's a visa consultant, and then there's a relocation consultant. So after visa thing is over, then the relocation, they actually help you in of course you'll get a temporary house for say 1.5 months or something. Then they have the consultant with you, who actually help you to find the permanent house. That is very very important facility AWS gives, because you are totally new here, and you don't
Exactly,
know how to
exactly.
find out the things. So that consultant will book one day, and you just go with him and hunt for say 4 to 5 houses. then they will also help you in understanding and checking the agreement and all the legal things regarding the apartment, etc., etc. They make sure that nothing is
Mm-hmm.
some problematic there.
Okay, I get your
So
point.
till you move to that apartment, that particular consultant is with you actually. And
Good.
it was very good facilities actually. We specifically when you are migrating from one country to other. I've never had such an experience in any of the organizations. So it is totally, it's a unique kind of
Mm-hmm.
experience. So somebody is helping you right from very, opening a bank account is very simple thing. But when it
Yeah,
comes to other country, then
exactly.
you need some help. And that also from that up to the finding the apartment and moving it, so that facility is there. And of course the as this role was sponsored role, visa is sponsored, plus the dependent visa is also sponsored by AWS.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Good. Thank you. Now there's some question around loop interviews. I'll take that. So
Yeah,
5 hour loop interview is not like five people grilling you for 5 hours. It's every individual would come, talk about 45 minutes or hour or so. You
yeah,
may get a break and then another person would come in. And don't expect that people would be only from your own domain. It could be, let's say, somebody coming from, let's say, Kindle team, another one from Amazon Prime, another one maybe from AWS, another solution architect. So that can happen. Maybe marketing people. Obviously, they have something to do with that role, but it is not a direct day-to-day responsibility of that person. So there would be five people, each talking to you individually, and once these interviews are done, then they would talk collectively and then decide on what to do next. Loop interviews are mostly done in one day, but it is not mandatory. It can spread across multiple days also, depending on
yes,
availability and other factors. Like if you feel, like if I recall my loop interview, it was in one day, and by the end my started in around like morning 9 and it lasted up to 5 on that day. And I was so exhausted by the end that, hey, I wanted to say that you take me or not, but I'm not going to give another interview anymore. It was
and was
exhausting
it
because
on
it's
site, right? It
yeah.
was that time.
No, no, I could not travel. I had some commitments. So I was
Oh,
called to Luxembourg, but I said I can't come because I have too much travel planned. If I come to
yeah.
Luxembourg, then it is a lot of things I have to reshuffle. So it was all online that time. So yeah, it was complicated. But yes, the first choice given to me was to come to either London or Luxembourg. But I said that both would not suit. I already had travel
Oh,
planned, so I couldn't go. So that was done online. But yeah, it was nerve wracking, I would say. It was complicated. Now, for people who go to loop interview and if it is on one day, keep some sugar with you. Sugar could be in any form, candy or juice or whatever. But yeah, you would need that glucose in your body till you reach to that point. So that would be my personal advice if you happen to have 5 interviews in one day. You would be exhausted, very, very exhausted, because
yeah.
questions are not yes and no. Questions are all elaborative and you have
Yeah.
to think on top of your head to give us some answer. So that's interesting one.
And
All right.
so just add, important thing is it's leadership principles, but they don't let you know which leadership principle that questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree on that. I
Yeah,
agree on
so
that.
that is very important. They don't ask you, okay, so what is customer obsession?
Mm,
So that is not a type of question. So
mm.
they will ask you a question which actually they actually looked the find the answer related to that particular leadership principle, not a direct question.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, so you moved to London, joined AWS. What next? Like, what happened from that day up to this point today? Like, what your journey been? What kind of support you were given to like move forward with that or learn something, or what is your ramp up looking like?
Yes, yes. So the plan is 3 months plan called induction on the 3 months, or you can say onboarding. What is
Mm-hmm.
it called, right? So it's a 3 months onboarding. So here they actually have one portal where they assign you all the activities for work, week 1, week 2, week 3, 1 month 1, month 2, and month 3. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to just follow that particular schedule, and they include all kinds of virtual training, then the and the job related, of course, training. And in my case, it's a technical instructor, so the requirement is I should be a authorized training instructor, right? It's a AWS training instructor. So what are the prerequisites of those? So we need to complete those prerequisites, and prerequisite main is the solution architect associate certification. So in my case, that my previous certification was expiring on 6th January.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I need to recertify. So last Saturday I recertified and cleared that. So
Nice,
that's
congrats.
that is the prerequisites. And yes, there are some compulsory one-to-one schedule workshop or on-demand training you have to go through as a requirement, onboarding requirement. And
Mm-hmm.
in my case, specific role, after I get authorized AWS authorized instructor certification with me, I will be ready for delivering the lectures and
That's good thing,
the
isn't it?
AWS.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you. Now there is a question from Pawan. Sorry, Ramkrishnan, that can we ask Amazon to conduct loop interview in multiple days if that is up to Amazon? I think there is flexibility. We are
Yes,
not rigid at all. Means there is a flexibility. Hey, we have some commitment, and obviously, if you want to stretch out, now it is your decision. I would say, for me, I'm a kind of a person. Start something, finish it, move forward,
same.
right? Otherwise, sometimes some people think, let me take 2 interviews today, be prepared for it, and then do 2 3 again, and then it is like a long loop which happens, which you are always into that pressure. Hey, I want to prepare, I want to prepare. So it's a personal preference. Everyone is different, everyone prepares differently, so pretty flexible there, should not be there.
Yeah, like I
Nalin, yeah,
selected one day. So
yeah, that's a good thing.
I'm asked, yeah, I have asked whether you want to span in 2 days or one day. I said one day is fine because
Okay,
I think virtual was little bit from the exhaust point of view. Virtual
exactly.
was little bit relaxing
Easier.
because you are in your home and
Home
you can
comfort,
relax
exactly.
for that break.
Yeah, yeah.
That is.
Obviously, when you travel, like if you, it used to happen, people used to travel for that, and obviously
Yeah,
it would add extra pressure, like time zone differences, and then you are getting accustomed to, you are
right.
little more nervous, obviously meeting that many people for interview. So yeah, home makes you a little comfortable, so that
Correct.
is good there. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Question from Nalin was, what was your previous certificate? So I think he told about he had a solution architect associate, and you
Associate,
renewed it,
yeah.
right? You
Yes.
renewed it now by just going for
Renewed
it,
it.
so
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
So it's a
Now,
3 year renovation. So
validation, yeah. So 3 year
yeah.
validation. Good. Revati has a question about, was the question on the service directly or scenario based? Like if they asked you in a technical question, was it a scenario based question or was it a direct question?
No, not a scenario kind of it. It is a direct.
Okay.
So, for example, how DNS works. So
Okay,
that kind
it's
of.
a direct question.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
direct
no
question.
complications on that.
No.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, so technical round won't be on scenario basis initially, but if you are, let's say, talking about solution architect, then probably in the second round and all, it would go into that particular type of scenarios where you have a customer situation or they have given you a project to complete. So they would ask questions around it. So yeah, it can happen. So thanks for sharing that. Any tips, Abhay, from your experience, like what 2 or 3 things worked for you best, which help you to succeed in the interviews?
Yes, first is I think all those resources must be in our BeSA site, right? So
Yeah, it
those
is.
resources are awesome. So go through that resources. And as far as the technical stuff is concerned, the workshops and tutorial and the free tier account is
Hmm.
must. So and actually, if you got a chance to say attend some workshops or that community program, local community program, also helps, and you may get some credits also. Like I've attended one workshop that in month of January, immediately after my certification. So there I got a $25
Credit,
credit that
account
you
credit
can
for
use for
AWS.
building some solutions using a free tier. So that's the very important as far as the technical is concerned. And for
Mhm.
behavioral, as I said, yes, document the understanding of each and every leadership principle on your own words, and just rework on that.
Makes
That's
sense.
another,
It's good
yeah,
advice.
important.
Good advice. Yeah, Abhay, you can share your LinkedIn profile if you could. If you
Yeah.
or you could get in touch with me, I can send you. That should not be a
Yes, yes,
problem.
no
So,
problem.
so
I'll
that's
describe.
completely fine.
Yes.
And obviously, thank you for sharing that particular detail with us. And we hope you settle well. Probably your
Yeah,
family
yeah,
would join
yes.
you soon. Maybe it is a challenge to be in a different country and then trying to find the place and all.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
thank you so much. It was inspiring to hear you all, and thank you everyone for attending. We would
Yes,
post
thank
this
you.
into YouTube, and feel free to reach out if we can help you in any ways in getting to AWS. Maybe it would not happen directly or in that very moment. Currently, hirings are on freeze, but obviously, no harm in preparing, right? Nothing to
Yes,
lose.
yes.
You
It's
never
good
waste
time to
what you
prepare
learned.
actually.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much, Abhay, and thanks everyone. And we
Thanks,
hope to
thanks,
see you
Asif.
next week. That would be the last session for BESA for this cycle, and we would then try to collect some more data from all of you so that we can make the next cycle much better and can help you more individually. So thank you everyone. Have a good day. Have a good weekend, Abhay. Thank you.
Bye, bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye,
Bye
Ashish.
bye. Bye
Bye,
bye.
all. Bye.